Americans think they've got some skin in the game in terms of whether or not they want to participate in a protest or otherwise take part in some sort of civic activity to say no, to show their dissent, to register their disapproval of what Trump is doing. Because what the Washington Post is reporting on Trump's plans for health care, this is Trump's plans for health care after the 10,000 people that he just fired from HHS. On top of those 10,000 people fired from HHS, Trump's new plan is reportedly to cut another $40 billion from U.S. healthcare and health research. That's fully a third of what the United States spends on healthcare and research. Trump wants to cut all of the CDC's work, for example, on heart disease and obesity and diabetes and smoking and HIV. You think that might galvanize people in this country? Trump is not saying he wants to trim these programs or make them more efficient. The plan, according to this document published by the Washington Post, the plan is to eliminate the CDC's work on heart disease, obesity, diabetes, smoking, HIV. Yeah, because it's not like any of us know anybody who has any one of those issues, right? No one within the sound of my voice right now has any connection to anyone with heart disease, right? Have you ever even heard of that? Heart disease? Does that sound like a foreign concept? I mean, Americans will sure be glad that Donald Trump forced the United States of America to stop working on heart disease altogether because, yeah, none of us have ever heard of anybody having a heart attack, right? None of us have anybody in our families or anybody we're connected to who's got problems with cholesterol or high blood pressure, right? That's really exotic stuff, right? Yeah, obesity. Americans have no idea what that is. We've got no personal connection to that. Thank God Donald Trump is going to save us from the waste of the U.S. government working on those woke liberal problems, like diabetes. This was Missoula, Montana today. In deep red state Montana, Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders turning out more than 9,000 people today. Look at this. Look at that crowd. Middle of the day on a Wednesday in Montana. Yesterday in California, AOC and Bernie turned out over 10,000 people in Bakersfield, California, and 26,000 people in Folsom, California. This is not like San Francisco or Oakland or Berkeley. This is not a liberal enclave in California. And they turned out 26,000 people in Folsom.
You know, I heard that someone started flying a plane with a banner that said, "This is Trump country." It sure don't look like it today. I don't think this is Trump country. I think this is our country.
That was Folsom, California, in a Republican congressional district yesterday. This was the day before that, Monday, in Ruby Red, Idaho, a sold-out capacity crowd of 12,500 people. Look at this. In Nampa, Idaho. This was the day before that in Ruby Red, Utah. 20,000 people turning out to see Bernie and AOC in Salt Lake City. This was the day before that in Los Angeles. Senator Bernie Sanders, his office saying that this crowd that turned out in drop the chyron there so people can see the crowd. Thank you. Senator Bernie Sanders' office saying this crowd of 36,000 people that turned out to see him and AOC in Los Angeles on Saturday was the biggest crowd that Senator Bernie Sanders has ever spoken to anywhere. These are just massive, massive, massive events that the two of them have been holding in California, but not in the, not necessarily in the blue state caricature parts of California. And also in Utah and Idaho and Montana. And these crowds are out there for two of the most dynamic and most unapologetic fighting progressives in all of U.S. electoral politics. The Fight Oligarchy Tour. Senator Sanders' office says of the people who've been RSVPing for these events, yes, most of them are Democrats, but they say 21% of people turning out for these events are independents, and they say 8% of people turning out for these rallies are Republicans. And 8%, I know, 8% sounds like single digits, but 8% when you're talking about 200,000 people they've spoken to at these events thus far, That's saying something. And huge events like these that are being done by Senator Sanders and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, huge events like these are definitely saying something about how the country feels about this political moment and about Donald Trump. And I will say, just in terms of the media, the sheer size of these events and the fact that most of them are in red states means that they're starting to get a ton of press and a ton of attention from the mainstream media. And that, of course, is starting to rattle everyone in politics on all sides, which is always fun to see. But I'll tell you, you know, seeing those big events and seeing all the press they're now getting is fantastic to watch. But look around, because when it's not an event with thousands of people, which obviously is going to get a lot of attention, what we're still seeing is thousands of events, thousands of protests, protests that are happening every day and in every state. I mean, here's just a snapshot. Yesterday, protests to save Social Security from what Trump is doing to it at the Social Security field office here in Peekskill, New York, and at the Social Security office in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and in East Vancouver, Washington, people, again, protesting to protect Social Security. In Baltimore, Maryland, people protesting against Trump letting his top campaign donor, Elon Musk, access everyone's personal data at the Social Security Administration. This was outside the Social Security headquarters in Washington, D.C. yesterday. You see the sign there. Elon has your SSN. Elon has your Social Security number. Protests in Atlanta against Trump's mass firings at the CDC. These protesters in Atlanta joined by Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock and Democratic Congressman Hank Johnson. In Kansas City, Missouri, people turning out protesting against Trump's mass firings at the IRS. In San Francisco, protests against Trump turning the IRS into a weapon to be used against immigrants. At Florida International University in Miami, protests against Trump's attacks on immigrants and on international students. No ICE on campus. At the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee, a protest against students' visas being revoked. More protests against Trump's attacks on immigrants and international students at Emory University in Georgia. In Burlington, Vermont, a protest outside the detention hearing for Rumeysa Ozturk. She's the Tufts University doctoral student, the Fulbright scholar, who was snatched off the street and taken to a prison in Louisiana by masked Trump agents who didn't show their names and didn't show their faces, put her in an unmarked car. Yesterday, also in Louisiana, a protest outside that immigration prison, which is holding Rumeysa Ozturk, and also holding Mahmoud Khalil from Columbia University, and frankly, thousands of other people whose names we do not know. People protested at the Tesla dealership in Chicago yesterday, including these kind of cute signs that are shaped like Cybertrucks. I've never thought Cybertrucks were cute, but the signs shaped like Cybertrucks are cute. People protested at an announcement by the Indiana governor, Mike Braun, when he announced yesterday that he's going to try to do to health care in Indiana what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is doing to national health care for Trump. Oh, boy. Indiana residents turned out at the state capitol to tell Governor Mike Braun what to do with that idea. Signs saying things like, Governor Braun, why ask a lawyer for medical advice? And hands off our vaccines. And simply, clown show. The resounding no that you are hearing, or the resounding clown show raspberries, or the resounding ovation for the this doesn't look like Trump country, this looks like our country comment from Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez. I mean, what I just showed you is just a snapshot of a day. But that kind of resistance, that kind of saying no, that kind of rejection of what Trump is doing and are willing to protest it and say no to it. It's taking every different form, right? I mean, the pro bono legal defense network for federal workers, more than 1,000 lawyers joining that to work pro bono for federal workers. The mutual academic defense agreements for colleges. The big rallies, the small handful of brave protesters making sure dissent is visible at local congressmen's offices, local Social Security offices, local IRS offices. We also saw it yesterday in something I've never really seen before, a very unusual show of support for judges and for the judiciary. A small group, including a sitting judge and a retired judge, and a number of legal academics, legal professionals, asked people to convene online yesterday to show support for judges and their families and stand up in a nonpartisan way against threats to judges and their families. Among the judges who participated in this was Judge Esther Salas, whose husband was grievously wounded and whose son was murdered in New Jersey. I first heard about this. I thought, one, this is a very unusual thing. You don't hear about the judiciary asking people to stand up for them very often. And two, because the threats that judges and their families have received right now are so terrible, I thought, even though this is a very unusual thing that they're asking people to do, I thought, you know what, I bet they are going to get a pretty good response to this. I bet they're going to get, like 200 or 300 people to show up online in this Speak Up for Justice event. I thought they'd get, I thought they'd get a couple hundred people. I thought they might get like 500 people. They got more than 7,000 people joining that event in the middle of the day on a Tuesday. So the ways people are standing up and saying no, and standing up and saying they reject this, and standing up and giving the administration the one-finger salute, to put it in blunt terms, they are innumerable and unpredictable. And they surprise me every day that we cover this stuff. But today we saw something from a U.S. senator that we never thought any U.S. senator would ever have to do. And so add this to the pantheon of things that people are doing to stand up to this administration and to try to stop some of the worst that they are trying to do. As one federal judge started contempt proceedings against the Trump administration, and a second judge threatened them over the Trump administration refusing to comply with court orders, insisting that there's no law that can constrain Donald Trump from sending people from this country to a foreign prison indefinitely with no legal process at all. Today, a U.S. senator, Senator Chris Van Hollen, Democratic senator from Maryland, he himself flew alone to El Salvador to try to get back one of his constituents, to try to get back a Maryland resident who Donald Trump sent to that foreign prison in El Salvador, even when the Trump administration admitted that trying to deport him in the way they did had been an administrative error. Residents of Maryland have been protesting every day at the courthouse as a federal judge in Maryland has been ordering the Trump administration that they really do need to go get him and return him. Senator Van Hollen says he promised Kilmar Abrego Garcia's wife and his mother that he would do everything in his power as a senator to get Mr. Abrego Garcia back. Well, today, the senator went to El Salvador himself to try to get him. And Senator Chris Van Hollen joins us live from El Salvador. Next.
Safe Light Repair, Safe Light Replace. Nobody